Senate will please come to order. Chief Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Senate roll call, day 8, Thursday, January 23rd. Anderson? Barlow? Boner? Brennan? Case? Cooper? Crago? Crum? Dockstetter? Driscoll? French? Guru? Hicks? Hutchings? Ide? Jones? Kolb? Landon? Larson? McEwen? Nethercott? Olson? Pappas? Pearson? Rothfuss? Salzar? Schuler? Scott? Smith? Steinmetz? Olson?
Excused.
Excused. President Beitman.
Here.
Mr. President, 30 present, 1 excused.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. Prayer by Reverend Richard Gilbert.
May we pray. Uplifting and sustaining God, enable us to be wind beneath wings. We are grateful for Joe Silbaugh and Larry Hanley, who coined these words, and Bette Midler, who sang them into our soul. And now may they continue to be a reality within our prayer. First, even amid this busy Senate session, we pause briefly to offer our gratitude for those who have uplifted, upheld, and have been and now are wind beneath our wings. Parents, siblings, relatives, spouses, friends, teachers, constituents, and a host of others who have given us flight and the ability to soar and even land within this privileged place. Our gratitude humbles and abides. Secondly, we honestly and urgently ask of you, uplifting God, that we not be so caught up in the exigencies of life that we decrease the lift beneath the wings of those who wish and work to soar, whoever and wherever they may be. It is not always ours to know whose lives we lift, and sometimes we are taken by surprise of those we do. By your gracious power, enable us to help others soar. We honestly pray that we do not ever be a downdraft leading to destruction, and earnestly pray that we be an uplift that elevates, encourages, equips, and enables each and all to achieve your intended purposes for their lives. So we pray in the name of the one who said, I have come that you may have life abundantly. Possibly and hopefully the same will say, I have come that you may soar. Amen.
Senator Pappas, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There you go. Special guest to our traveler.
Will the reading clerk please read the Journal Committee report?
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of January 22, 2025 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Crum, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any objections? There being none, the report has been adopted. New business. The Doctor of the Day, we have one virtually. Liesl Dr. Lisa Finkelstein from Jackson, Wyoming is available if you need her online. Get with the Sergeant at Arms if you need the number to call, but we do have a doctor available today, and we thank her very much for that. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Today in history, in 1957, toy company Wham-O produces first Pluto platter, soon renamed the Frisbee. 1986, the first group of artists were inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Among the first inductees were Ray Charles, James Brown, Elvis Presley, and a few others. Quote for the day, "It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves," Mr. William Shakespeare. And the dad joke of the day, who put bad dad joke of the day on the script? I'm offended. What do you call a bear with no teeth? A gummy bear. There it is. I don't write them, I just read them. Okay. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, January 22, 2025. Message number 114. Mr. President, the House adopted the Committee of the Whole report failing House Bill number 51, Municipal Courts Maximum Penalties, ayes 21, noes 3, noes 38, excuse 3. The bill has been indefinitely postponed. Sincerely, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Randy. Are there any reports from standing committees yet? No, not yet. All right. We'll read those in as they come. Bills on second reading. Let's see here. All right, let's get this pile here. All right, bills on second reading. Senate File 2, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 2, Hunting Licenses, Weighted Bonus Systems, Senate File 2.
There is an amendment. Will the reading clerk read the amendment?
Senate File 2, second reading amendment number 1, page 16, line 3, delete.
Okay. Senator Landon, this looks like your amendment, sir.
Mr. President, I'm catching up. My apologies. Just trying to get to that amendment. It came up a little quicker than I anticipated.
Okay, take your time, sir.
So, Mr. President, I would move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 2. We had a great discussion on this bill yesterday, outlined from this desk some of the concerns that I had, one of which was this transition period that we talked about. What this amendment would do very simply is extend that enactment of this law out 2 more years. Instead of a 5-year lag time, this would put a starting date 2 years after that, make it 7 years. That's going to help our department immensely. I think it's going to help, no question, some of our sportsmen that we talked about yesterday. I think it's going to give them at least an additional 2 years. I just think it makes the cliff maybe not quite as steep. And so I would ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Sure. Any discussion? Senator Hicks?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, regretfully on and against the amendment. Again, the reason that the task force ended up with that 5 years, and so keep in mind, that initial draft of that bill was 2 years ago. So we phased in a 7 years from that time. That there's been some version of this out there. And the reason the task force come up with that, because that tended to be where you saw the natural bake and the statistical data that those highest point holders could move through. And so they've got 5 years right now. That was a recommendation that came out of the task force based on review of all the statistical analysis to make sure those highest point holders, keep in mind, there were a maximum of 30. Most every one of those would have an opportunity to draw a permit in the next 5 years if they're 22 or more points. It's just a choice of what unit they wanted to go to. So I think we did look at this. I think we made the best decision possible for the most people, and I understand my colleague. I mean, we have all different constituents, depending on where they're at in the point system, that may want a longer or shorter, but I would resist this amendment, Mr. Chairman, and go back to the original recommendation that came out of the task force.
Any further discussion on the amendment for the sponsor? All right, we'll go back to the sponsor. Senator Landon.
So, Mr. President, with all due respect to the task force, and I do appreciate the work they did. This was one of the heavier lifts, and I get it, but I also want to go back to a couple of things that I said yesterday, Senators. This greatly impacts our middle-aged hunters. They are the ones who we have stood on their backs to put that Game and Fish Department over on sportsman funding. They have been contributing with their license purchases for the last 2 decades to earn these points. All I'm doing with this is setting this 2 years further back to give an opportunity for some of those guys. This is a big, big change, folks. I think it's okay for us to give a little bit of time for those sportsmen out across our state who have invested a lot in our wildlife management. So I would ask you to support the amendment. Let's give a little bit more time to those people who have substantial preference points, and they're worried about just falling off a cliff and losing everything that they've built up. Let's give them 2 more years. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of Senator Landon's motion to adopt second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 2, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Second reading amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Senate File 2 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 3, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 3, mule and whitetail deer separate hunting seasons.
There is an amendment. Will the reading clerk please read it in, please?
Senate File 3, second reading amendment number 1, page 1, above line 1, in.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. President, thank you. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 3 and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, this is a 2-page amendment that's very meaty. It technically corrects, I've been wrong all my life saying white-tailed deer, it's white dash tail. So 35 times we corrected. I'd ask for your favorable consideration.
Got to respect the hyphen there. Any discussion on the hyphenation? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I'm a little bit concerned at this, being the president of the Anti-Hyphen Society. I think this is just something that's an egregious abuse of the use of a hyphen, and I would ask for you to reject this amendment.
Anybody else? All right. Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Driscoll's motion to adopt second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 3, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Senate File 3, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 8, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 8, protection orders effective during appeal or review.
Senate File 8, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 28, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 28, ROTC Endowment Program.
Senate File 28, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 34.
Senate File 34, School Finance, Routine and Major Maintenance Calculations.
There is an amendment. Will the reading clerk please read in the amendment?
Senate File 34, second reading amendment number 1, page 2, lines 21 through 23, delete.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 34 and ask for your favorable consideration. Fellow senators, yesterday we made an amendment to this bill to make the funding one time. This just goes back and revises the calculation so that it is only one time as well for the 25-26 school year. I believe that we need to keep those two things woven together. And when we come into the budget session next year and we understand what our finances are looking like, how things have moved through the system with some of the other bills we're considering, then we can have this discussion during the budget session. So just trying to square up some of those components in that important piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Steinmetz. Any discussion? Yeah, Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. And I want to thank the senator for coming over yesterday evening and visiting about this amendment, giving me a heads up. I did all I could to convince her that she was wrong, but you see the result of my visit. No, with all great respect, I understand where the senator's coming from. This major maintenance issue's been around for a long time, folks. For the past decade, we have talked about the fact that we just aren't taking care of the buildings the way we should. If we make this a one-time, I assure you the districts back home, your district, whichever one you represent, is going to be very grateful, and there's going to be a project in there that they can benefit from with a one-time. I strongly believe that we should be incorporating this as we move along. I don't think the budget picture's ever going to get any better. It's just, when are we going to have the will to put into those buildings what we know we should? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Landon. Any further discussion before we go back to the bill sponsor, or the amendment sponsor? Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vote aye.
All right. You've heard the motion. All those in favor of adopting second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 34, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Chair's in doubt. Let's do a standing division. All those in favor, please stand. Okay. 18, all those opposed? Aye, 12 no. The amendment has been adopted. Back on the bill. Senate File 34 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 63, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 63, State Lands Fencing 2.
There is an amendment. Will the reading clerk please read in the amendment?
Senate File 63, second reading amendment number 1, page 2, line 1, after.
Back to you, Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 63 and ask for your favorable consideration. Fellow senators, this is just a little cleanup. On page 2, on line 1, after state lands and investments, we're just inserting, or if the state lands are currently leased, the lessee of the state lands. Just for the body's edification, lessees of state lands, when they invest in the fencing or other improvements, should that lease be abandoned or they non-renewed or they let it go for some reason, they are compensated for the improvements that they have on the land at fair market value. And so I think it's only fair the people utilizing the land and benefiting from the fence, if that is currently leased, that we don't charge the office, we charge the lessee. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Any discussion? Senator Crago.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a good amendment. I talked to the bringer of the amendment, and we worked together on it a little bit, so please vote aye.
Okay. Senator Larson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree. I think this is a good amendment.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Since you're ready for the question, all those in favor of Senator Steinmetz's motion to adopt second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 63, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Amendment has been adopted. Senate File 63 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 80, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 80, abandonment of water rights limitations.
Senate File 80 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. Senate File 81.
Senate File 81, tax exemption, property owned by the state.
Senate File 81 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Oh, well, we got an objector, conscientious objector. Senator French.
Mr. President, I'd like to lay this back one day.
Without objection, absent objection, Senate File 81 has been laid back one day. All right, that takes care of second reading. Madam Majority Floor Leader, we have a consent list.
Mr. President, I move the consent list, which is as follows. Senate File 19, Impact Assistance Payments, Maximum Percentages and Review. Senate File 26, Protection of Military Equipment. Senate File 27, Wyoming National Guard Member Referral Amendments. Senate File 36, Music Therapy Use of Title. Senate File 48, Business Property Exemption. Senate File 49, Tangible Personal Property Index and Depreciation. Senate File 56, Providing False Information to Registered Agents. Senate File 57, 911 Service Reporting. Senate File 59, Registered Agents Release of Records. Senate File 90, Youth Organizations in Schools.
Okay. Would anybody like any of the bills removed from the consent list? Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question on Senate File 26, would like it removed.
Okay. Senate File 26, Protection of Military Equipment, will be removed from the consent list. Make a note of that. Any others? Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, could we pull Senate File 48 and Senate File 49, please?
Okay. Senate Files 48 and 49 will be removed from the consent list. Any others? Senator Pearson.
Thank you. I would still like to talk about SF 90.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Could we please have that one removed?
Yes, Senate File 90 is removed from the consent list. Youth Organization and Sports. Senate File 90. In schools. My apologies. Any others? Okay. Make sure I got my list correct. So now the consent list consists of Senate File 19, Impact Assessment Payments, Maximum Percentages and Review. Senate File 27, Wyoming National Guard Member Referral Amendments. Senate File 36, Music Therapy, Use of Title. Senate File 56, Providing False Information to Registered Agents. Senate File 57, 911 Service Reporting. Senate File 59, Registered Agents Release of Records. Will the reading clerk please call the roll on the consent list?
On the consent list, third reading, final passage. Anderson? Aye. Aye. Barlow. Boner. Brennan. Case. Cooper. Crago. Crum. Dockstader. Driscoll. French. Guru. Hicks. Hutchings. Ide. Jones. Kolb. Landon. Larson. McEwen. Nethercott. Olson excused. Pappas. Pearson. Rothfuss. Salazar. Schuler. Scott. Smith. Steinmetz. President Beitman.
Aye.
On the consent list, 30 aye, 1 excused. Senate File 19, are there any changes? Aye to no. French? Aye to no. McEwen? Aye to no. Hutchings? No. Larson? Aye to no, sir? Yes. Aye to no? No. No. Salazar? No. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 19, 24 aye, 6 no, 1 excused. Senate File 26, are there any changes?
Point of order, 27.
Thank you, excuse that. Senate File 27, are there any changes? Aye? Aye to no. French, aye to no.
Case, aye to no.
Case, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 27, 27 ayes, 3 noes, 1 excused. Senate File 36, are there any changes?
Aye to no.
Hicks, aye to no. Boner, aye to no. Ide, aye to no. French, aye to no. Larson, aye to no. Hutchings, no. McEwen, no. Nethercott, no. Salazar, no. Kolb, no. Pearson, no. Rothfuss, no.
Beitman, aye to no.
Biden, no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 36, 17 aye, 13 no, 1 excused. Senate File 56, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 56, 30 aye, 1 excused. Senate File 57, are there any changes? Aye to no? French, aye to no? McEwen? Aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 57, 27 aye, 3 no, 1 excused. Senate File 59, are there any changes? Smith? Aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 59, 29 aye, 1 no, 1 excused.
Okay. Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 19, Impact Assistance Payments, Maximum Percentages and Review, Senate File 27, Wyoming National Guard Member Referral Amendments, Senate File 36, Music Therapy, Use of Title, Senate File 56, Providing False Information to Registered Agents, Senate File 57, 911 Service Reporting, and Senate File 59, Registered Agents, Release of Records, have passed the Senate. Third reading, bills on third reading. Let's see here. Senate File 26, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 26, Protection of Military Equipment, an act relating to crimes and offenses, sponsored by the Transportation Committee.
Any discussion on the Senate file? Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I may have missed it, but this has some created language in the beginning that grants immunity for use of force by folks defending the equipment of the military, but then it also adds a new person or type of person called a state security officer. And a state security officer means a person employed by the military department whose primary duties include being armed and securing military assets controlled by the military department. Now, previously, this is not a sworn member of the armed services, as I can understand. This is not a National Guardsman. This is not a regular Army person. This is some security officer that's employed by the military to defend these assets. And so I'm trying to understand, I'm not sure what I think about that, Mr. President, that we have someone that's employed by, not a sworn service member, and not someone who's taken the oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, and these aren't necessarily law enforcement, and I don't see where the state security officer anywhere is a trained peace officer. So I'm trying to figure out what that really is, and maybe we can get an explanation. And if we need to deal with that, we could lay this back for another day, but let's try to get that explanation.
Thank you, Senator Case. Discussion? Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, the state has had state security officers, there's 17 of them, embedded in the 153rd Airlift Group for years, for decades. So we have two, actually more than two, but we have two great big employee types, state and federal. So the federal employees, which are your Guard members and folks on active Guard Reserve, the full-time folks, they have this immunity through the federal government. The state employees do not have this immunity, yet they're doing the same exact job, and they have been doing this, as I said, for decades. It just recently came to light that this immunity did not extend to those folks that were state employees. To my knowledge, I could be wrong, and certainly, we could certainly lay it back and we could find out this information, but they are trained just to the same level as the federalized people are. But they are state employees. They do not have the ability to have the immunity, although they are required by the federal law. There is a federal law out there, Air Force Instruction 31-117, that requires them to use deadly force on certain priority assets. And so they're required to do it, or they can't do their job. Yet, they don't have the liability immunity that the federal employees do. So all this is doing is allowing to indemnify them just like the federal employees are. The training of the state security officers, I can't answer that. If it's a big question, certainly we could lay it back and I could get that answer, unless someone on the floor has it. Anyhow, that's best I can do, Mr. President.
Appreciate the explanation. Senator Ide?
Thank you,
For your first
Mr.
time.
President. I like the bill. It'd be nice to include citizens in there. I know it's a little bit late, but just looking at that, I don't know why force couldn't be applied to the citizens as well as, the use by the government and the citizens. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I certainly appreciate the intent, and I think it is an appropriate attempt. But when I look at and I apologize, I didn't actually dig into this a little more. I thought it was pretty clean cut. When I look at it a little more, we're looking at the bill in the 104 section. The current statute talks about orders of the government. Well, we know that the armed forces, we know who the commander-in-chief is, that's the governor. I'm a little curious about how the governor plays into an employee, a state employee. That is not the same relationship as a commander-in-chief. So I'm interested to know actually what is the chain of command for these state security officers? Are they employees of a state agency, or are they actually in the chain of a command under the adjutant general, obviously, who is subservient to the governor? So any enlightenment of that, I certainly appreciate and agree with the intent, but any enlightenment of the chain of command in this would be appreciated. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Boner, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's a testimony in the interim that they're embedded within the Security Forces Squadron. So it'd be the same chain of command as the active members of that squadron. These are your sort of military police or the Air Force equivalent of them. And so, we can double check, make sure, say, if the Uniform Code of Military Justice applies the same way. These are good questions. As say, to a state employee as it does to somebody who's on active or state active duty orders. I think these are good questions. And, if we need to tighten up the definition of state security officer to reflect that they're performing similar duties as their active duty counterparts, something like that nature, I think perhaps that could be a worthwhile endeavor as if we want to lay this bill back, Mr. President. But yeah, certainly good questions. I know that I felt very comfortable that this was going to be used responsibly by our military department, and that there's a clear, compelling need to make sure that these folks are protected for simply doing their job and following their federal orders and protecting what is ultimately, we talk about a C-130, a federal asset, right? And so perhaps we need a little bit more thought into crafting the language of this bill to ensure that everybody has a good comfort level. That wouldn't be that hard to do, but I'll leave it to the current members of the committee, but that's what I recall from the interim.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else for their first time before we go back to Senator Case? Anybody else for their first time? For your second time, Senator Case.
Mr. President, thank you so much, and I appreciate the discussion. And I don't mean to throw a wrinkle in here, it just caught me. So if there's no objection from the Senate, could we lay this back for one more day? And I appreciate maybe there could be a little information sheet or something about the training or more thinking about this. I'm sure it's fine, but I want to be real sure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Hearing no objection, absent objection, Senate File 26, Protection of Military Equipment, has been laid back for one day. Senate File 48, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 48, sponsored by the Revenue Committee. Business property exemption, an act relating to taxation and revenue.
Discussion, Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I asked for this to be set aside. I want to compliment the Revenue Committee on trying to accommodate all the citizens of Wyoming with tax exemptions, but I'm afraid we just can't do it. And this is one that I would like to object to because it is not for the citizens, it's for the businesses. And we did not set out to exempt businesses, so on and against this bill.
Any other discussion? Senator McEwen, for your first time.
Business owners are citizens. And if the business gets some tax relief, it allows them more money to pay employees, do improvements, and continue down the path. The other thing is, we've been trying, and I personally have at least been trying for 3 years to simplify this and provide some relief. It's really an immoral tax. It's one of the worst ones we have. And the price tag on this is tiny. So I would urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. And I too want to thank the Revenue Committee. It's a pretty heavy lift these days. And hearkening back to our days of the previous session, Mr. President, we've worked very hard to try to dig deep and find some way. But I bet you've been the same way. I've laid awake at night and thought about this a little bit. And my only caution to the body is that at some point, I think we need to decide where the bar is, what our tolerance is for being able to help the folks back home. When we keep putting bills in the bucket, you know, I just want to encourage every senator in here to think about what we can do realistically and think about that total in your mind and what sort of ramifications that's going to bring down the road. So every chance we get, I think we should have this conversation right here. Just remember, we're stacking all these together, and we just need to be aware of that, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for this bill, this, taxes have fundamentally infringe on property rights. This is a small step to getting more autonomy to the private business owners, and I encourage your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Rothfuss, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on and against the bill in its current form, we had a good debate the other day, and I expressed some concerns about how exploitable this bill is as it's written. And while the price tag right now is something that we could perhaps bear realistically when it's structured the way it is, where all businesses would qualify for it, and the cost of setting up an LLC relative to the cost of paying this tax is trivial and takes a trivial amount of time. I'm worried about what the fiscal note looks like a few years from now on the way this is structured. So, even if I was okay with the fiscal note, and I do think it's probably higher than we want to be. I just can't foresee where this is going to go when LLCs, corporations, and individuals figure out that they can use this as many times as they want. And we'll see it used an awful lot of times in some creative ways at that point. So, I think we need to be cautious. We have a lot of pieces of legislation related to revenue that we're taking a look at, and we need to be prudent about how much we cut our revenue, recognizing that we will have another downturn at some point. Those of us who've experienced those downturns, they're incredibly painful. We're in sort of a nice time right now where we have the capacity to provide some revenue decreases perhaps, but we need to be thoughtful, and this is one that scares me based on its current form. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Anybody else for their first time before we go back to, let's do Senator Jones for your first time.
Mr. President, sorry. I agree. We have a lot of bills that are coming that are going to affect our county's bottom line at home. We need to think about this long and hard. How many services do our constituents want us to cut down here? The more money we take out of the county's account is less and less services that our constituents are going to be provided.
Anybody else for their first time? Let's do Senator Cole.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I guess I heard the big pressing issue here is property tax reform. Now we have yet another decrease that's going to be one less bucket of cash in said state's ability to do that. Although I have fundamental problems with how we're doing it currently, and this does address some of those. I think we can't be focused on everything. If we are, we'll get nothing done. I've heard that it's an immoral situation. Well, it's a business situation that people have got involved with, and they pay these taxes. And while it's small now, it's a negative. This is money that we will not be able to use for property tax reform, to be clear. We do not have an endless supply of money, and we can't print it. So I'm not in favor of this because of those reasons and the negative effects on the local counties that we're not talking about. It is more than just what this bill would represent. So on and against. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Case, for your first time.
Sorry, Jim. Mr. President, thank you very much. Mr. President, I understand people that stand and tell you that this is an immoral tax. They don't believe in it. This is an attack on a fundamental right to own property. It's unconstitutional. It affects us as sovereigns. I've heard that. We're part of a society and a government. And this is a long-standing taxation method that actually goes back as early as our independence and even before as a nation. Over the years, it's evolved to be a uniform system, very, very uniform across the states. Almost every state taxes in the same manner and uses some of the same techniques and appraisal techniques we use in Wyoming. It's actually very uniform as it's worked out over time. It's considered in some aspects to be fairer than other taxation methods because the rich man pays more than the poor man. The man with a big house pays more than the man with a small house. The people with the big business, the big property used in that business, pay more than people with less. It's enshrined in our Constitution. It's specified in our Constitution that all property shall be taxed. There's another aspect of this is that we can't get away from the full value that's required under our Constitution by creating exemptions. We can't do that. Where it says that the legislature may provide for exemptions. There's a list of things that the legislature can exempt. Interestingly, government property is one of those. Churches is another. They're different things. And it says such other things that the legislature can provide. But the such relates to the list of things that are before those types of categories. So we've tortured exemptions. How else are we going to do it if we get rid of property taxes, Mr. President? That's also the basis for half of the payments made by our mineral industry. It's ad valorem taxation, property taxation on the mineral production. That plus the severance are our major mineral revenues. There has been no court that has said that these taxes violate the Constitution in the sense that they are an attack on property. And we can say that, and we can believe that, and hope for a time where there's a different society where that happens. But that is not the reality now. This is the way we fund local government, not our state government. And it's really time that we stand tall and realize that the future of the state's at stake. If we keep willy-nilly getting rid of property taxes at a time when Wyoming is in great transition, and we don't quite know what that's going to look like. But with our zeal to cut taxes to get to the bottom, we're already the lowest taxed entity in our region. But unfortunately, that's matched up with the fact that we are the slowest growing state in the western region, and we have the lowest population growth. And we have the lowest taxes. How does that all fit together? You'd think with low taxes, they'd be flocking to come here. We have to provide good government services. Our citizens depend on it. We have to be responsible stewards of today's dollars and future dollars, our children's education, the work of government, and the time to start being responsible is now.
Anybody else for their first time? Okay, second time? Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, I appreciate the previous speaker mentioning that this does not affect the state. It affects all of our local entities, which is your fire district, your school district, all the districts within you. So that $4.2 million goes right back to your locals. This does not backfill. I agree with things like this if they backfill. If the state wants to put up the money so the locals don't take a hit from these exemptions, then I'm for that. But this doesn't do that, so it's going to take the money away from my local agencies, and I still object on and against the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else for their second time? Anybody else wish to speak for their second time? Seeing none? Oh, Senator McEwen, for your second time.
I just want to address a few things. Your constituents are local. Your constituents are the ones that are screaming for this tax relief. Is it going to affect the counties and cities? Yes. Is it going to affect the state? Yes. The impact on this in the mineral industry is minimal to non-existent. So I would push back strongly on that argument. The formation of LLCs. Spoke with the Secretary of State. It's still like I thought it was. In order to form an LLC or an S corporation, you have to have a federal tax number. And you have to search the database with a name that doesn't exist. So anybody who wants to set up 3 separate corporations to get $300 to $400 worth of tax relief are going to pay $100 to the state for the filing fee, $150 for the tax ID. And then let's not forget, you're going to go out and form, as the example was, 100 little LLCs to take advantage of this. You're going to file 100 corporate tax returns. And the last time I checked, those aren't free either.
you're going to be into this for thousands and thousands of dollars. You're going to spend more trying to cheat the system than you are. And if you're going to cheat the system, there are people who do that, whether we pass this or not. As far as the constitutionality on exemptions, Wyoming versus Hutton, 1985. Appraisal interest versus Wyoming State Board of Equalization, 1999. State versus Olson, 2000. Oh, and this one's my favorite. Teton County versus McEwen. Kern versus the Department of Revenue. Martin versus the Board of Equalization. State versus Yellowstone Property Owners Association. Wyoming Taxpayers Association versus the Wyoming Board of Equalization. All 10 of those pieces of litigation were held up that exemptions are constitutional, and we're not skirting the Constitution to do it. This is the only way we as a legislature can affect tax reform or tax relief without a constitutional amendment. We had a meeting last night, and I heard a couple of people say, man, we don't like people out there getting signatures and putting ballot initiatives on the ballot. Our forefathers didn't support that either. However, that's staring you in the face too. But I'm going to go back to this, and I want to give you one thought before you vote. Oh, one other point before I close. Businesses are, in my opinion, are not flocking to Wyoming because of our tax structure, or not flocking to Wyoming because of our tax structure. Businesses are not flocking to Wyoming because of the overburdensome regulations. To open a business in Wyoming can take up to 5 years. By that time, the idea is stale, and they found another place that's not so hard to do. So as you look at this and you think it's unconstitutional or people are going to cheat it, when you vote, understand your vote is, I'm pro-business, pro-small business for Wyoming, or I'm big government. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else for their second time? Senator Case.
Mr. President, a corporation can own other corporations and roll the taxes up to the parent corporation. So you don't have to file a tax return on each of the entities. Wyoming has a particularly easy way to establish LLCs. It's called a series LLC, and it can be used to own, it was specifically designed, in fact, I think, to own either pieces of equipment or real estate in a separate entity. And those separate entities don't each have to file taxes. They could roll up to the parent. It's true.
Anybody else for their second time? Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I heard it stated that everyone's screaming out for this. So I can assure you people in my Senate district are not. Okay? Maybe they want some property tax reform, yes. That's probably the number one thing, and that was low. What they wanted was government not to waste money. That's what they wanted. This is not anti-business. My businesses, they realize that they're paying for services, and that's what our property tax pays for. Be clear, services. It's not an ongoing tax. It's about services you're getting, and much the same with this. So on and against the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Senator Ide, for your second time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. You know, this is a pretty small hit to the state. You know, our producers, our small business people are the ones that generate revenue. You know, the state just they just eat revenue. I think this is a small bone to throw to the small businesses around this state to help them prosper, and they can generate more sales tax revenue if something like this gets into law. I don't know why there's such a big opposition to this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anybody else for your second time? Anybody else? There's no thirdsies, Senator McEwen, sorry. Okay, looks like debate is over. Sensing you're ready to vote, Senate File 48 having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass the Senate? The chief clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 48. Anderson? No. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Doggstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? No. Cole? No. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? No. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 48, 22 aye, 9 no.
Senate File 48, having received the affirmative vote of the majority members elected to the Senate, Senate File 48 has passed the Senate. Senate File 49, third reading of the Senate file. I'm sorry.
Senate File 49, Tangible Personal Property Index and Depreciation, sponsored by the Revenue Committee, an act relating to ad valorem taxation.
Senator French.
Privilege of the floor, Mr. President.
Granted.
Good senators, in the balcony to your right is former county commissioner. He decided not to run for a 4th term, so he served 12 years up in my county, Park County. County Commissioner, former County Commissioner Lee Livingston.
Okay, my apologies. We typically don't do privileges of the floor during third reading. You kind of caught me off guard there, Senator French.
My apologies.
Okay, just a friendly reminder. Sorry about that to the body. Okay, I don't see any amendments. Senate File 49, any discussion on the bill? Any discussion? Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, I asked this to be pulled aside for the very same reasons. It's a decrease of the ad valorem taxes, which is for state. But we have lots of bills that are going to bring for individuals or property owners an exemption, and I don't want to give this exemption out and cost the state more money. On against the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for the first time? Senator Case.
Mr. President, I rise in favor of this bill. This was a product of the interim work. It establishes a floor of 20% and gets rid of the trending. This was a worked out bill between industry, the Department of Revenue, and the Revenue Committee. This is a good bill. It's supported by industry, and you remember we had discussions last year where people complained that when this business personal property, which is the term I prefer to use because we don't have it for personal people, the complaint was it was kept on the books forever and it was trended back up. And there was a trending based on a market value. Do you remember that? This is an arrangement where we're going to have rules that cap the bottom down at 20% and that they will stop the trending. So it's pro-business. It simplifies the code with some of the complaints that have been offered by my fine colleagues from the Revenue Committee and others. And so I do hope you'll support it. It's a different issue than the other bill, and shouldn't think that they're together with the same thing.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else for the first time? Senator McEwen.
I do want to clarify what I meant earlier. The senator from Fremont County is absolutely right. You can form subordinate LLCs and corporations under one corporation. What I should have said, in order to take the tax exemption, you have to have a separate EIN for each element you're going to take the tax exemption for. So if you roll it all up into the parent company and you report that on the EINs, that's about all I have to say about that. And I hope you'll vote aye on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for the first time? Seeing none. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I agree with the concept of this bill, but I do see that it, on the fiscal note, it appears to cost around $33,500,000 a year. So while it's good policy, it's expensive good policy. And again, we have to be thoughtful about trade-offs. Is this our top choice? Is this the most valuable thing that we're putting 33.5 into, or would property tax reform, where we're trying to get that homestead exemption in place, be a better place to put the 33.5? For me, at this point in time, I know we're going to spend a substantial amount of money on that property tax reform. And remember, this 33.5, it's not just about us, right? This is money for firefighters, this is money for schools, money for your sheriff, money for your roads back home. I don't see anything here that provides appropriate support to make up for that. So we are eliminating firefighter jobs with this particular bill. There's no two ways about it.
Anybody else for the first time? Anybody else? Oh, Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. In my past life, I was a county commissioner for a few terms, and this particular issue that's being addressed here is something that I certainly didn't like the way it was done. And I think this bill goes a long way to rectify that, so I am in support of this. It's a fairness issue. Even though it is a negative for the counties, it is a problem in that regard. However, at this level, I think the fairness thing for me means more than the dollars we're talking about. I just think it's the right thing to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else wish to speak? First or second time? Question being called. Senate File 49 having received, Senate File 49 having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass the Senate? The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 49. Anderson? No. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? No. Case? Aye. Cooper? No. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Cooper, no to aye. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 49, 27 aye, 4 no.
Senate File 49, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 49 has passed the Senate. Senate File 99, third reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 99, Game and Fish Property Tax Exemption, sponsored by the Travel Committee, an act relating to taxation and revenue.
There is an amendment. Will the reading clerk please read in the amendment?
Senate File 99, third reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 4, after.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99. Members of the body, if you'll recollect our conversation during Committee of the Whole, we had quite a discussion about the exemption of housing for agencies. After going in and looking at the statutes across the board, what we found out is most all of those other agencies are paying for housing for the employees. This amendment looks like a lot, but it only does one thing. It just comes in and it just levels the playing field and says Game and Fish Department, just like every other agency of the state of Wyoming that provides housing for employees, or even those counties that periodically do this, those properties are taxable. So it's just it's really just an equalization for all uniform taxing of housing by agencies, both state and local. I'd ask your favorable consideration. Stand for any questions.
Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor of Senator Hicks's motion to adopt third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment has been adopted. Back on the bill. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Senate File 99, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass the Senate? The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 99, Anderson. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Anderson?
Excused?
Excused. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Anderson? Aye. Anderson, aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 99, 31 aye.
Senate File 99, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 99 has passed the Senate. Senate File 90, third reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 90, Youth Organizations in Schools, sponsored by Senator Crum, an act relating to education.
Discussion on the Senate file. Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we discussed earlier, I have a problem with just blanketing these organizations that are in these statutes. Over the past 4 years, many of these organizations have been infiltrated with DEI. Some of them have got charges and accusations of unthinkable things to children. And so, for that reason, if I love the intent of this bill, I am a patriot. I love that kids maybe want to get involved in some of these things, but I'm wondering if it's a good thing to be bringing this into the schools, and possibly because the word says it's patriotic, that if parents and school districts are not looking into these patriotic organizations and the things that they have done, you know, they could be misguided, and our children could, you know, possibly be harmed. So I would love it if we could list organizations that are acceptable, but I love the intent of the bill. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Crum. Oh, Senator Case?
It might be better since he's the sponsor if there's a little piling on. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes.
I tried to figure out what these organizations were, and it's a huge list. Lots of good things that I'd love to read out here, entities that you know. There are historical societies, there's war veterans, there's youth organizations, there's people that celebrate culture. Just it's a big list. And maybe I'm reading it wrong and this bill narrows them down somehow, but kind of saying that they can come into the schools. I mean, this is kind of back to us being the school board, I think, a little bit, Mr. President, and it's a little bit far out there, I think. And I think there's really good intentions from a really fine folks behind it. But I've got to say no. And I'm going to let the school board decide who gets to come into their schools because they're elected and they have the job to do that. And I hope that we continue to have schools interact with the community. I don't want to shut our schools down from the community at all. I don't want them to be armed fortresses where people can't go and interact. But I don't want to tell them what to do either, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For your first time, Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I heard from my local schools on face value, they said, maybe. But then they, as a group, administrators, trustees start to reflect on what might this open the door to. They said perhaps a word of caution here because we may have something head in the wrong direction while we're trying to do something here patriotic and help our schools and help our youth. We may open up a door to something we don't want. They were asking me to use a word of caution on this vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else for the first time? Senator Crum.
Mr. President, this bill is a very straightforward bill. Where they come from is Title 46 is where these youth organizations come from, and Title 36. And there is a big list under Title 36, but how it narrowed down was youth organizations under Title 36. Those organizations are some very familiar names that you're going to be familiar with. The Navy Sea Cadets, Marine Corps League, Girl Scouts of America, FFA, FFA.
Point of order,
I'm
sir.
sorry, I'm sorry.
Yep, let's not name names.
Very patriotic. Can I say guys that wear blue jackets? Youth organization wear blue jackets?
Sure, that works.
Youth organizations wear blue jackets. Youth organizations that have the clover. Youth organizations that have green shirts. Very worthy, solid organizations. And all this bill does is allow these schools to allow these organizations in sometime, whether through an assembly or after school, to set up a table and do that. And what this bill tries to do is give parents and children an option to get involved in their communities in good things, like laying wreaths at Christmas. Thousands of wreaths were laid across in cemeteries in Wyoming over Christmas to our veterans. Flags were put out at Memorial Day by tens of thousands. We ride in on rodeos with the flag. These youth organizations are the ones that come when there's a flood and help people sandbag and help clean out their houses. These are very well organizations. This bill helps encourage kids to stand up and say the pledge and learn community responsibility and citizenship other than going home and getting messed up. And then there's something goes on and these kids, instead of standing up for our flag, are throwing bottles and things at our police officers. This is a way to build citizenship in our community. These organizations are non-threatening to our society. In fact, they help build society. They're very worthy organizations as spelled out in Title 36. And we heard the word DEI. Many of these organizations are chartered by the federal government. I think the federal government in the last couple days has just done away with DEI. And so DEI had to be a part of their organizations. I know many, if they haven't, are on the process of repealing that if that seems to be a concern. But again, would you rather have a child, no matter what their background, would you rather have them standing up and learning to say the pledge and good community citizenship? Or would you rather have them learning things on their own and becoming problems that society's going to have to deal with earlier? So I strongly, strongly recommend the passage of this bill on third reading.
Thank you, Senator. Let's go to Senator Schuler for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I supported this bill in committee, and I supported it on the floor. That's unfortunate, but it pains me greatly because I really personally like this bill, and I'm very proud of the bringer of the bill. But I've had a couple of my district superintendents in my county that have reached out to me, and once we added back the amendment for instruction time, when it was just during school hours, I think they were okay with it. But when we added that back in that said instructional time, they really are not in favor of it. So I'm going to have to vote against it, but it really pains me to do that because I really believe that I think this is probably something that's pretty good. But I do represent my counties and my schools and my people, and I have to speak for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hicks, for your first time.
Mr. President, on and for the bill, and one of the reasons that I signed on to this bill because it has an acknowledgement of parental rights in here. And so when you go to page 2 and you go down to line 22, is if these organizations are going to participate in those school districts, they have to notify the parents or the guardians of each patriotic organization's expectations, the presentations, and the options of the parents or guardians to withhold consent for their children to participate in. So, Mr. President, members of the body, I put all my faith, and we've had a lot of discussions over the year of parental rights. Those parents will be notified of the content and the time and the place where these things occur, and ultimately, it's that parent's responsibility to make a determination whether their child go through this. I'm more inclined to leave that discretion to the parent than I am a school district. And so on and for the bill.
Senator Smith.
Mr. President, I'm on and for this bill. The opposite is already true. The other side has already gotten to your kids. They're already there. The culture war is alive and well. Forget about your school system being a neutral ground. I have 5 kids. All of them have been in the public school, and trust me, the opposite of this is being approached to them. So I'm just this is a great bill, and what's wrong with giving kids access to groups that would teach them to be physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight, and also to honor their country.
Anybody else for the first time? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, these organizations are great organizations, and I think a lot of us have fond memories of these organizations and friends and family and ourselves that have participated in these over the years. So no discredit to the organizations and no concerns really about participation in them. What it really comes down to is, Mr. President, we can like an organization, we can like a concept, and we can support a concept without deciding that we have to legislate the solution. And so, as I've looked at this, we've got local elected school boards that are fully capable of making appropriate decisions for the kids in their school districts. And I would expect those school boards to be supportive of these organizations and find appropriate ways for the organizations to engage in the schools. And that's the level of government we need. Mr. President, as a counterpoint, a counterexample, imagine if 2 years ago there was a mandate from the federal government, from the feds, top down, that says every school shall provide during instruction time an opportunity for these devilish organizations to come into the schools that have views that are different from what we have here. Imagine that, because that's what we're doing. I mean, that's not that far out of the question. I'm not just making up a crazy scenario. I'm just suggesting that there are differing views in different communities, and we can respect that. And the top-down, heavy-handed solution of the highest level of government that can bring the issue to us is not necessarily the hand that we need. If my local school district would like to have one of these organizations participate, and I have no doubt that they do, they're going to be able to participate, they're going to make for those arrangements, and that's the appropriate level of government. It's okay for us to be passionately supportive of something and not mandate it, because we have different views in what is appropriate at different times. That's a strength, not a weakness. On and against the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Boner, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just have to jump in here as we talk about local control within our school system. I mean, what local control? This is a statewide school system that's been mandated by the courts, where your local school board has no say over revenue generation in particular. So in my mind, yeah, it's great. Local control, maybe we should, begin to incorporate some local responsibility in that discussion as well. The fact is, I appreciate the concept of the idea of the federal government coming in and telling us what to do. I know we don't like that, but can you imagine what would happen if the federal government were 100% responsible for funding education? Let's compare apples to apples here, Mr. President. So, I want to be able to work with our school districts. I want to be able to give them more responsibility, and I know that they're more than capable of dealing with it, but we're not there. That's not the system we have, Mr. President. We have very much a top-down system that where we control everything when it comes to the financial side of the ledger. So I want that to be a compelling argument. There's other bills I'm sure we'll have in front of us that will actually bring meaningful reform to this system, which is too top-heavy, which is too top-down. But until we get there, I have to say that this idea that we can't be a statewide school board is not convincing in my mind, because we've been that way for several decades.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Brennan, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for this bill, as the good senator next to me pointed out, on page 2, line 22, we do have that the parents need to be notified. And I think that gives plenty of control to the parents, that they can be notified and they can pull or ask their kids not to be part of these presentations should they want to. I think it is important that our students know of some of these organizations and extracurricular outside activities that are available. We talk a lot about our kids, the problems with anxiety and depression. And one of the things that leads to that is lack of community. And a lot of these organizations are going to bring community. They're going to help our students better themselves and find meaning and purpose in their lives. So on and for the bill.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else wish to speak? Those for your second time? Senator Crum, for your second time?
Yeah, just more of a point of clarification when we go through. We heard several people say that it was going to take away from instructional time. Just a reminder to my colleagues in the Senate, if you remember, amendment number 1 took out instructional time and in a classroom setting. That was removed in amendment number 1. So there is no instructional time and no classroom setting. Now, certainly if a school wanted to do that, they're open, they can do what they want in their school, but it is not required under this. It was taken out in amendment number 1. So again, this is during lunch breaks, after school during open houses, those type of things, and just giving families the opportunity to choose from from a whole list of organizations that have add value of character development to our youth. It's just giving parents choices. Again, as it's been said, parents do have a choice whether they want to stop or not stop. There's no cram down to parents or schools. So it is it does take instructional time, has been removed from this bill to make sure that our students get the learning they need. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else for the second time? Okay. Senate File 90, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? The chief clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 90, Anderson. Aye. Barlow. Aye. Boner. Aye. Brennan. Aye. Case. No. Cooper. Aye. Crago. Aye. Crum. Aye. Dockstetter. Aye. Driscoll. Aye. French. No. Guru. No. Hicks. Aye. Hutchings. No. Ide. Aye. Jones. Aye. Kolb. Aye. Landon. Aye. Larson. No. McEwen. Aye. Nethercott. No. Olson. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Pearson. Aye. Rothfuss. No. Salazar. Aye. Schuler. No. Scott. Aye. Smith. Aye. Steinmetz. Aye. President Beitman.
Aye.
Aye. Nethercott, no to aye. Closing. No to Hutchings, no to aye. French, no to aye. Larson, no to aye. Schuler, no to aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 90, 28 aye, 3 no.
Senate File 90, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 90 has passed the Senate. Congratulations, Senator Crum, on your first bill. Passing the Senate. Yes. Don't get used to it. Before we move on to standing committee reports, I want to apologize for the mistake I made during third reading to allow a privilege of the floor. I want you to know I'm deeply sorry. I respect our rules, customs, and traditions, and that won't happen again. Please bear with me as I learn the ropes up here in the chair. So, standing committee reports.
Mr. President, the following reports are dated January 23, 2025. Mr. President, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred Senate File 24, Special License Plates for Multipurpose Vehicles, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Brennan, Cooper, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Pappas, Chairman. Mr. President, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred Senate File 30, Wyoming's Investment in Veterans' Mental Health, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Brennan, Cooper, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Pappas, Chairman. Mr. President, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred Senate File 102, Surviving Parents of Gold Star Veterans Exemptions, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Brennan, Cooper, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Pappas, Chairman. Mr. President, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 91, petroglyph, pictograph, and historic inscription protection. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Jones, Landon, and Schuler. No, Senators Boner and Hicks. Senator Landon, Chairman. Mr. President, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 88, 2025 Large Project Funding, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Hicks, Jones, Landon, and Schuler. Senator Landon, Chairman.
Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives. Mr. President, the following messages are dated January 23, 2025. Message number 105. Mr. President, House Bill number 18, Career Technical Education Funding, passed the House on third reading. Ayes 60, excused 2. Message number 116, January 23, 2025. Mr. President, House Bill number 46, Homeschool Freedom Act, passed the House on third reading. Ayes 54, noes 6, excused 2. Message number 119, Mr. President, dated January 23, 2025. House Bill number 116, Driver's Licenses Unauthorized Alien Restrictions, passed the House on third reading. Ayes 45, noes 15, excused 2. Message number 117, January 23, 2025. Mr. President, House Bill number 47, Secretary of State Expedited Filings, passed the House on third reading in an amended form. Ayes 60, excused 2. Sincerely, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Randy. Senator Crago, did you have a privilege of the floor?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to acknowledge I have my members of my city council and my city clerk up here, and I just ask that we, from Buffalo, and just ask that you welcome them to the Senate, please.
Welcome to the Senate. Senator Pappas.
Yes, could I have the privilege of the floor, please?
Floor is yours, sir.
We also have some guests up here in the gallery behind the president. I'd like you to give a warm welcome to a political science class from Laramie County Community College, along with their instructor, Lori. I'm sorry, Lori, I don't have your last name, but welcome to the Senate.
Welcome to the Senate. I assume you're there. I can't see you, but I'll trust Senator Pappas that you are there. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. Senate File 88, the 2025 Large Project Funding, and Senate File 91, the Petroglyph, Pictograph, and Historic Inscription Protection Bills, both have appropriations in them, Mr. President, and I would ask that they be re-referred to Committee 2 Appropriations.
Absent objections, can I see those real quick, Ellen? Absent objection, Senate File 88 will be re-referred to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. Senate File 91 will be re-referred to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. Back to you, Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Absent objection, I also request that Senate File 30, Wyoming Investment and Veterans Mental Health, be re-referred from Committee 8, Transportation, to Committee Number 2, Appropriations.
Absent objection, Senate File 30 is re-referred from Committee Number 8 to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Any more re-referrals? Any privileges? Madam Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Privilege of the floor.
Granted.
This is kind of a point of inquiry, good senators. Just as a reminder, the Wyoming Energy Authority is hosting lunch for us down in the Capitol Extension from 11:30 to 1. Wyoming Energy Authority, see the cool new projects that might be underway in Wyoming. Thank you.
Mr. President, you could grab lunch and you could go to the briefing from lawyers on electricity taxation, which is going to be close by, in the auditorium at 12:30.
Okay, Senator Grew,
Thank you, Mr. President. Privilege the floor.
granted.
Thank you. Just happened to notice, I gazed back at the back behind the bar. I see that we've been joined today by our esteemed, dedicated, hardworking State Treasurer, Mr. Kurt Meyer, a former member of this august body for many, many years. Please welcome Treasurer Kurt Meyer.
Welcome to the Senate, Treasurer Meyer, former Senator Meyer. Thank you for all your hard work. Okay, back to you, Madam Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move that the committee, I'm sorry, Mr. President, I move that we beg leave to rise and sit again.
No, try again.
We stand in recess until 2:30 p.m. Good Senators, 2:30 p.m. because we will caucus today at 2 p.m. in room W110 to discuss management council and take votes. So meet at 2 p.m. as a full Senate caucus, W110. We will come back for committee of the whole this afternoon at 2:30. With that, Mr. President, I ask that we stand in recess until 2:30 p.m.
Okay, you've heard that motion. Are there any announcements? Any committee announcements? Chairman Olson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet upon this noon recess. So it looks like we have a little bit of time to grab some food and then down to the committee room number 6 to hear SF 9 Restoration of Rights Amendments, SF 104 Probate Code Revisions, SF 10 Settlement Agreements for Minors Parental Authorization, and Senate Joint Resolution 1 Convention of States.
Thank you. Senator Schuler? Chairman Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. President. Education Committee, number 4, will meet tomorrow morning to take a look at 2 bills in W110 at 8 a.m. Senate File 86, Alternative Teaching Certificates, and Senate File 62, Restrooms in Publicly Funded Schools. They're just backwards, sorry. Thanks.
Chairman Case?
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 7 will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in Capitol Extension Room W4 and online. We'll take up 3 bills, Senate File 78, Prohibition on Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms, Senate File 87, Prescriptive Easement for Electricity Delivery, Senate File 111, Net Metering Revisions, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Chairman Landa, did you have anything? No? What about you, Mr. Vice President? Any committee announcements?
Mr. President, the Appropriations Committee will meet upon noon recess tomorrow. We will be taking up Senate File 17, Senate File 18, 51, 55, and 82. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. Any further announcements? You've all heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion to stand at recess until 2:30 p.m. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Senate will stand at recess till 2:30 p.m.